Welcome back to the Extraordinary Leaders podcast. Today, my guest is a return guest, my first repeat. It's Rod Yapp. Rod is the founder and leader of Leadership Capital. As an ex-Marine, he has integrated all his learnings from frontline experience as a Marine into business high performance. And Rod and I talk around three core areas that you need to listen to. The first is context. Do you know your context? You might think, of course I do. Do you really? Can you articulate it? Because if you don't, you might be misapplying yourself. We also talk about the space and need sometimes for a more callous approach. Now that kind of goes to the odds of, what about empathy? What about being a humble servant leader? Where's the place for an element of bringing a little bit of callousness into the space? And what is the difference between complex and complicated business? Because if we don't know which one it is, and Rod helps us define this, then we're going to find we misapply ourselves in leadership roles. I know you're going to need a notepad and maybe even an easel for this one. You'll see why. Keep listening. Rod, it is really lovely to have you back on the show. I actually think you are my first repeat guest. So this is, a great honor for you, Rod.
It is. It's lovely to see you again.
No.
And thank you for getting in touch.
Oh, no, it's great. So, Rod, what is the item that you have got that exemplifies extraordinary leadership?
So it's quite a good question that you asked me that, because it forced me to sort of think about it. And the item that I have got is a multi-tool.
Love it.
And the reason I've got that is because when you boil it down, leadership is about how you behave. It's about how you behave and the impact that you have on other people. But behavior is context dependent. How you behave on a stag weekend is probably different from like how you behave at a funeral. Hopefully it is anyway. And you're the same authentic person, but the context has changed. And I think that shows you how, depending on the context, dictates the behavior. So for example, like lots of people on LinkedIn will say things like that leadership is all about empowering people. And I agree with that to some extent. You know, I have empowered Marines to take some of the biggest decisions you can take around when and when not, crucially, to pull the trigger. That is empowerment at the most extreme, and I believe in it. However, that is not appropriate for every context and situation. There are times when it is entirely appropriate to move down the spectrum and take control and tell people what to do. If you and me were to be driving down the M4, traffic starts to build up in front of us, and we see the car in the lane next to us plow into the car in front of it. You do not want me to turn to you and go, what do you think we should do? Call the ambulance, call the fire brigade, should let someone else get on with it. Like technically I'm empowering you in that situation, but because you can see how the context is totally inappropriate, like it's an inappropriate way of leading. So leadership for me is about understanding the context and choosing a way of behaving. I'm naturally a bit of a control freak, but I'm working with some quite senior people now within my team. I have to empower them. I have to give them boundaries, constraints, and just tell them, right, this is what I expect. This is what I want you to do. And that is appropriate. So for me, it comes back to this point here. This is a great tool because it does a number of different things, and by its very nature, it is adaptive. So what I try and do is develop leaders who are adaptive. They can read the context, they understand themselves, and they can then choose a way of behaving to generate the best outcome for the individuals, the organization, and the people involved.
Yeah. I wonder if you were going to give a one-on-one now on how to dial up your ability to understand the context you're in, what would you say?
Context is very, very difficult to define because
Right.
It's about placing information in an order with a relationship so things make sense.
Nice.
So let's say I'm meeting an individual leading an organization for the first time. I will want to know, right, to talk to me about, depending on how old it is, where did the organization come from? How old is it? At what point did we get to this sort of stage here? What is it you're trying to do? So we talk a little bit about the past, right?
Yeah.
And that's different, right? If you are, as I have worked with in the past, if you're leading Hunter Boots, right? That company was started just before the First World War. That is very, very different from if you're in a founder-led business and the founder is the chairman, right? You can go to this person and go, why does all this stuff, why is it like this? And you'll get an answer. With a company that's really old, like it's too complicated, right? You won't know. A lot of that stuff has been lost to history. So it's understanding like where the organization has come from, what's got it to this sort of position today, and what is it trying to do? What does the future look like? What does the market look like? Ultimately, everyone is trying to do something in business, but so what does that look like? And what's getting in the way? What boundaries and constraints exist for you in the organization? Those are some those are some kind of key questions that will give me a sense of the context facing an individual leading an organization in that context.
And yet, something I find working with people is we're so, as human brains, we are adaptive, weirdly, on a very kind of carnal, primal level. We're highly adaptive humans. If you suddenly put me living in Timbuktu, it would take me a couple of weeks, but I'd figure it out. You know, we're really adaptive with context. And yet our brains are neurologically wired from if we're Western, from Western education, to kind of go from A to B to C to D to E. And so being agile is, in our brains and in our thinking, is actually quite a hard thing to unlearn and relearn a different way to bring that agility to different contexts. So when we're trying to navigate things and see where our context is, I notice we get so stuck in the way our brains are like trying to make sense rather than thinking outside the box. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it does. But then I think that's a product of our education, right?
Yeah.
You learn how to do something, you get tested on it, and then you do it. You think about like driving a car, learn it, test, do, right?
Yeah.
And that model works really well when we understand the environment, whether it's engineering, medicine, anything actually. And we're trained to it. So it's what we kind of stick with. In the sort of complex world, and we talked a little bit about this before I joined the call, the complex world where the rate of change is so fast, instead of learn, test, do, we need to reverse that and do, test, and then learn. And that to me is about feedback loops. So whenever I'm trying to do something to kind of grow my business, I very deliberately call it an experiment. So let's say I have a hypothesis that because my business is based on kind of relationship-based sales, I have good connections with military veterans because I am one. So what if for a year I ran a series of quarterly dinners where I just got veterans working in private equity-backed companies together for dinner, just a group, right?
Yeah.
What would that cost? Call it $5,000, in London for around 8 people. Run that as an experiment, see if anything comes of it. What have you lost? 5K. Not significant, right? So and again, if that works, then I double down on it, right? If it doesn't, then I walk away from it, and that's okay. So I think in the world that we live in now, that sort of, do stuff, like test it, work out what the feedback loop looks like, and then learn from it. That's how you find your way.
I love that. And I think, but as someone running your own business and running my business, I can see where that agility would work for me. But then when we think of clients we work for who are integrated in bigger systems, got 500 plus people working there, how do you see the kind of waterline on that for where agility sits and experiments sit?
So let's say you've got a company that's doing, I'll make these numbers up, 40 million, wants to get to 100 million in kind of a few years, right? Doing more of the same won't get you there.
No.
So there needs to be a conversation around, right, where do we think this extra 60 million is going to come from?
Right.
What gives us a sense that is achievable?
Mm-hmm.
Often with these things, they're like quite big round numbers. And I'm always a bit skeptical of those because 100 million is probably because we got, 10 fingers and 10 toes. There's probably not much.
Just plucking it from thin air.
Yeah. And look, that's okay. That's as good as anything. But the question I want to have is more around like, how are you going to get that? Where are you going to play? Where are you going to win? What does your average spend look like? How are you going to drive that up? Are you going to expand to other areas outside of your existing market? How well saturated is your existing market? Have you got new products that you can bring to bear that are going to help close the gap? Things that are slightly adjacent to the sort of stuff that you do. Like fundamentally, way too many organizations that I have worked with in the past, a bit less so now, they have a vision for the future and they think that's kind of good enough. Just having a big, hairy, audacious goal will get me there, and I just need to kind of keep plodding towards it. It absolutely won't. I guarantee you it won't. You need to have a clear sense of what that path looks like, and be clear on what you expect people to get there. And that requires setting up running experiments to see what the ground looks like ahead.
I agree with you for the most part, but you said, I guarantee you it won't work, carrying on with what you've always done. Why would you guarantee it won't work?
That's a good question. Let's talk about an organization go from 40 to 100. Let's stick with that, right?
Yeah.
To go from 40, you may be able to do that with, call it 100 people.
Yeah.
To get to 100 million, unless you're in a software as a sales business or something different, you're probably going to have to scale by people.
Yeah.
Okay. So one of the things as the leader, as the CEO of that company, you need to get really good at is hiring in good people who can deliver on your behalf.
Yeah.
And you may have certain levels of control at this moment here and now, but to go from where you are today to where you want to be involves taking the company on a very different journey and actually relinquishing a heck of a lot of control.
Yeah.
You need to have this sort of balance between bringing in like great people and making sure that they know what's expected of them, how they play a part in the delivery of that vision, and then holding them to account for it. And if they are not delivering that, then understanding, well, what is it they are spending their time on? And that is this constant like zooming in, zooming out picture.
Yeah.
And that's hard to do. We tend to be too much on one or the other, or we don't do it sort of adequately enough. I mean, this is a challenge that I have as well, the extent to which I'm delivering and working in an organization and working on it.
Yes.
It's really hard.
It is really hard. I mean, I love metaphors. They help my brain navigate. It's like riding a bike. You've got to press on both pedals. If you're just pushing on one, you're going to fall off. The balance and momentum comes from the tension of both, doesn't it? And often we get caught in business as usual and carry on doing what we've always done without stepping into that business development space of experiments and trying new things and scanning out. It kind of nods back to this thing of context. So what I've observed with businesses and organizations is that because growth externally in our wider context of globalization is so fast, what's relevant 2 years ago is kind of already like we've moved on, and everything's condensed compared to any generation before of how fast things are changing. So as we're approaching leadership with context changing, how do we experiment, but nodding to this thing of excellence, of operational excellence, of execution? How that tandem, how do you see that working?
So for those sorts of things, I'll sort of like signpost something here and then try and kind of explain it sort of briefly. But there's a guy called Dave Snowden who created or developed something called the Cynefin framework. And Cynefin stands for, I think it means habitat in Welsh off the top of my head. And what he argues is there's basically only really, in simple terms, I'm going to simplify this. There's basically only kind of 5 domains that people find themselves in. There's the simple or clear domain, which is the world of process, right? Yep. There are sometimes we just need to follow a process. Unloading a rifle is the example I use in the military, like getting an insurance claim filed. It's all about following the process. It's very predictable. If you do X, you get Y. There is one best way of doing something. The next domain he talks about is the complicated domain. And this is the domain of principles. So an engineer building a bridge needs to understand the principles of geology, how materials work together. It's not a process thing. If there's one best way, then the answer becomes a suspension bridge. But the reality is that there's depending on what it needs to carry, how much money you have, all of these different things.
Yeah.
There are a number of different answers, right? So it could be suspension, could be span, could be an arch, a number of different things, right? So that's where principles come in. And generally, people are familiar with these two worlds because they're relatively ordered and structured. So clear, the world of process; complicated, the world of principles. The other 2 domains, or the other 3 actually, are complex. And people mix complicated and complex all the time. The
Mm.
world we live in now is much, much more complex than it has been before, largely because it is so interconnected and there are so many variables that it makes it almost impossible to predict the future.
Mm-hmm.
The way I think about this again is like if I take some elements, from the periodic table and I mix them together in a controlled environment, that reaction is predictable because I know what I'm doing, I know what I'm getting. Now, if I said to you, right, I'm just going to take a load of elements, random ones off the periodic table, chuck them into an environment and see how they react together, I can't predict that. And
Yeah.
that's the world we live in now,
Yeah.
right? So complicated is to do with like network effects. It's a difficult thing to explain, but hopefully the kind of chemical elements aspect kind of
Yeah.
clarifies it. Afghanistan, for example, serving there with the Royal Marines in 2007 was a complex world.
Mm.
We didn't understand tribal dynamics. It was incredibly difficult to get a sense of that because they wouldn't tell us. Concepts that we understood, like central governance, didn't apply. So almost everything we did there, like
So all your principles just didn't hold it.
exactly, it just did not work, right?
No.
Because it's a complex environment. The
Yeah.
last two, sort of really for completeness, is there
Yeah.
are certain times when you need to make action and work. You need to take action and work out whether it was the right thing to do later. If someone comes running across London Bridge with a knife, right, you run away and then work out what they're doing, and you
Yeah.
either hide or fight.
Yeah.
Very rare, but that's where time is of the essence and danger is what's facing you. And again,
Yeah.
like military experience in that. The last one that Snowden talks about is basically that of disorder. And he says that if you do not understand which domain you are in, you will always get it wrong. If
Wow.
you try and apply process to a complicated, a chaotic, or a complex environment, it will fail every single time. And that was one of the things that really shifted my thinking around leadership, complexity. Complexity science is actually a thing, right? There is a subject. You ask people to define complexity, and very rarely can they do it. Um,
Wow.
Dave Snowden can. So if that's of any interest to anyone,
Well,
it's not my language. I'm taking stuff from Dave Snowden, the
but what
Cynefin
I love,
framework.
I love this framework because it actually nods back to when I said, "Can you give us a 101 on how to understand context?" And actually, it kind of is. It's and the benefit of recognizing this is that if you're in disorder, you don't know which context you're in, and you will fail.
Or even if you're like, and this is what happened in the pandemic. People, very smart people, who learned about how to apply principles, were applying principles into a complex domain
Yeah,
to try and fight a virus that we couldn't see and couldn't test for.
yeah, yeah,
Like what we actually needed to tell the public was we are going to lose. Lots of people are going to die, and we cannot control that. But who wants to hear that? Which prime minister is going to have that as a speech written and go, I'm not saying this?
no.
Because in those moments, we need someone to be confident, even though they may well be wrong.
And
That's it.
that's and herein it lies that how do we lead in this future space of all of these components? How do we lead knowing our context, recognizing it so that we can do that well? But then the second hand thing is how do we then communicate to the people around us so that we can give them the message that's going to enable them to come with us without terrifying them with the fact that I can't control this. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah. I do think, I do, certainly with some of the organizations I work with, mostly sort of private equity backed, will go on a kind of call it 3-year journey, right? Because that kind of keeps it simple. And instead of thinking of things now in 3 years, there used to be this idea, right? Have a long-term vision and kind of go after it, make it really 10-year goal. I'm like, no, right? If I'd come up with a vision for my business in 2015, it would have had to have survived a number of different challenges, not least the Brexit and the pandemic, which
Yeah.
are big strategic shocks that have hit the UK. So what I think it's better to have is a kind of a 10-year sort of sense of direction. Where do you want to be?
Yeah.
A slightly clearer 3-year goal, which I think is manageable.
Yeah.
Then you run 12 quarterly sprints to get to that 3-year point.
Yeah.
Because you and me probably have a reasonable sense of what's going to happen between now and Christmas. So I can say to you, Dolly, right, that's where you want to be in 3 years' time. Between now and Christmas, what are you going to have done?
Yeah.
Right. And that should be reasonably clear. That's manageable. Then in January, we can go, right, January to the end of March. What does that look like?
Mm-hmm.
And there may be other things where you're like, actually, no, Rod, I want to do that. It's like, okay, put it into H1 for next year or Q1 for next year. Fine. Like, that's not a problem, right?
Yeah.
But controlling what you can control and working or sprinting towards an immediate horizon that you can see, I think is a good approach.
Yeah.
Because in December 2025, the world may look different. And therefore, you need that context and understanding before you go again.
Yeah.
That's what I think.
Well, I think that sounds like a very clear process, and which I like, and works with the kind of principles of agility and change in the complicated spaces we're in. So yeah, that works. I just want to nod back to something you talked about, looking back to understand where we are to move forward. And if you've got a business like Hunter Wellies or something, that's been around for hundreds of years, you can't work out quite where this decision came from. So I work with one or two businesses that are very long standing. And I also work with startups and scale ups. So there's such polarities in where they're at. Let me give you an actual case study. So a business I know that's really long standing, got riding in many great ways on the laurels of their brand, of their heritage. But here they are in this fast-paced space, and they don't have the processes in place to be agile enough to move forward fast. Everything's quite old and bureaucratic. Similarly, though, with new startups and scale-ups, they haven't got really anything. So they're constantly in design mode for processes and things all the time. So there is a bit of synergy between something very new and something old, that the old ones don't have stuff in place to be agile. The new ones are trying to invent new things and haven't got anything tried and tested. So how best can you high perform when processes either aren't there yet or are too, it's for the old businesses, it's hard to kind of change the kind of, let's for want of a better word, the kind of architecture of their processes. How would you help a leader in those spaces when the processes just aren't there yet?
God, that's two very different organizations.
But not entirely dissimilar in terms of the output that they need, which is processes to work for this modern life.
Yeah. So, and again, one of the things I've really found helpful is if you write things down, it becomes clear.
Nice.
So, and I did this when I was at Urenco, right? And when I first joined it, everyone would give me very complicated explanations for how an enrichment plant works. And I was just like, I just can't get my head around this. And I just got to the point where I was like, right, I went to a guy who was on his last couple of weeks before he retired. And I said, like, A3 paper, pencil, ruler, draw it, right? Because I get this.
Yeah.
Like, we take something called uranium hexafluoride and we put it into this magic box and we get something we want, which is enriched uranium up to 5%. And we get something we don't want, which is depleted uranium. And he's like, yeah, that's basically it. I was like, right, so draw that, okay? So you put this stuff in here and all you do to enrich uranium is you spin it round, okay? And this is where I am unprepared, Dolly, but bear with me. One of them is heavier than the other. And the heavier stuff is, whichever it is you get like this U238 or this U235. And I forget which one it is, but one of them you want, one of them you don't want.
Got it.
But by spinning it round, you get this sort of like, you get this enriched uranium on the other side, okay? And it's as simple as that. The only slight complication is your byproduct, whichever one that is, comes out, let's say it comes out here. And depending on the cost of energy, imagine I'm squeezing juice from an orange, right?
Yeah.
Like a bit of power will get so much. If energy is cheap, I can squeeze harder and get more. So you can put these things called tails back into the system, right? And that is depleted uranium going back in there, just getting a bit more juice out in effect. But But effectively, enriched uranium then goes to power plants and kind of that's it. Now, that's the high level diagram, okay?
Yeah.
Inside that, there's a load of other stuff. So I'd be like, okay, I get that. Now take it to the next level. You can do that with any business, right? Any business provides value for someone. So whether you do Jaguar Land Rover, whether you do my business, understanding that system and drawing it out creates clarity.
Wow.
Then you can start to go, right, well, okay, so how do we do this? We don't know how to do this. Okay, that's fine. What does good look like? Let's write down the process that sits underneath that. For a larger, more complicated business, often those processes don't exist, or they are unfit for purpose and they don't work. At which point, as you draw this system out, you're like, right, what does good look like here? And people will say, well, this bit is a complete bottleneck. This is a nightmare. Why? Because the process we are following isn't fit for purpose. So, for example, take a search business I used to do some work with. It's a £50 million business, right? Decent size. CFO signed off every single invoice, which meant he didn't sign off every single invoice. He couldn't, but he was so unwilling to let go of control. Even though people had purchase orders for things, there were multiple levels of bureaucracy. And so I literally getting in the room and going, right, let's map this out. How do we pay people for stuff? And what became blindingly clear was that we were really slow to pay people. It's like, this is not good.
Right.
Like, this makes it harder for us to, get good people. There's a message out there that we are slow to pay people because of this bottleneck. What's the consequences of that?
Yeah.
Do we know? I can guarantee you it's not good. If I live in a house and, I have tradesmen coming in working for it and I pay them really, really late, the message gets out in the area where it's like,
don't work for him.
For that guy.
Yeah.
Suddenly
you need a plumber overnight, they won't want to come.
Suddenly I have to choose second-rate tradesmen.
Yes.
And so drawing these things out, that simple example.
Do you know what? So there's two things there that I think are really powerful for people to really take away, which I'm taking away is, number one is responsibility. Mm-hmm. Actually, where my process is inefficient or bottlenecked, we can become a victim to that and go, oh, it's just so difficult. Actually, it's on you that you are causing yourself damage because you're not giving that space the reverence it needs to make your business work well and have better reputation. And that always, in the training room, it's always the greatest gift we have as human beings is willpower, is the will to be able to have agency to do something different. And so that's the key point, isn't it, in business, just recognizing, where do I have agency to do something that's going to be better for the business? Number one, responsibility, because the amount of times people are subject to, it's just bad, it's just process, it's not my fault, oh, it's this big problem. But the second thing that I love about that is the drawing piece, because actually there is a social science behind writing on paper, not even digitally. I love writing digitally, but writing on paper actually accesses different parts of our cognitive function that typing doesn't. It gets us access to parts of us that are desperate for clarity. And drawing visually is something we palm off as a nice to have, an arty day, a kind of fun team building day, but it's actually extremely powerful for holding complicated and complex things in a different way. I think that's a real takeaway. Yeah,
so often, like if I'm doing a speech or trying to work out, right, how do I get this concept across to this kind of group of people? I'll write down, like, right, who's the audience? What is the kind of individual in here look like? And what I want them to think and feel. Then I'll start thinking about, how do I map that journey out? And it's not linear. It's all over the place.
Yeah.
I go, well, I've got a good story there. That will resonate. But then what I'll never do it like in one day and then like, that's it, deliver it tomorrow. I will do it. I'll do a bit of it. Then I'll come back to it because I'll go, no, that bit doesn't resonate. That doesn't work.
It's iterative, isn't it?
It is exactly that. It is iterative. It's like running a series of things and then you go away and reflect on it and you come back to it.
Yeah,
it's absolutely the best model for doing stuff.
Do you know, I my kind of thing is like, how do we learn from home life for business life? And so my son got himself in a bit of a sticky situation with this kids game called Roblox. And I haven't really taken the time to understand Roblox. All I just whatever is going on. Anyway, there became this problem with his friends and parents got involved. So I was like, crumbs, I've really got to understand what's going on here. So I sat down with the 11-year-old and was like, tell me, what's going on. And I just didn't understand a word he was saying. It was so abstract, so complicated and complex. I couldn't apply any principles. I kept trying to think, oh, it's a bit like that. Oh, no, it's not. It was so complex. And so I said, let's draw it. And he drew it. And I said, draw your friends that were involved, draw the problem, draw this, draw that. And it was through drawing it that I really understood the nuances and went, oh, I see the problem. I understand now what you can't communicate verbally, articulately. I get it. And it was really helpful because I was then able to speak to the parents and they were like, how on earth did you get that? I just didn't spot it. I said he drew it. And I think that's exactly what we're saying, isn't it? Something that's totally outside of our world that we don't fully get, or something that's so complex. If we can just pictorially see it, we can start to spot things that we might otherwise miss.
But also, I think like simple is clear.
Lush.
Clarity doesn't exist in lots and lots of organizations, right?
It really doesn't. It really doesn't.
And it's actually I say that like it's easy to create that. It's really
No, I agree.
It really isn't. You have to be clear on what you want and rigorous and disciplined in communicating it over and over again. I did an offsite for a company 2 weeks ago. Brilliant. They're doing incredibly well, and I'm completely convinced that one of the reasons they are doing well is because, as a software business,
Yeah.
chairman and the CEO are in complete lockstep. There are 3 things to work on: reducing customer churn, generating new revenue, improving the tech stack. Nothing else matters. Now, I'm not in that company, right? And this was 2 weeks ago, but I can still play that back. That's what clarity looks like.
I love that. And that's not easy to get. Absolutely.
No,
Do you know one of
hard about what you want and what you like is what is secondary and you don't care about. And that's what leaders should be doing, thinking hard and being decisive about what they want.
I think that is so key. I mean, something I say in businesses where I don't understand things, I'll say, can we stop a minute? Can you talk to me now and tell me what you do, but pretend I'm a 12-year-old?
Yeah.
Just tell me. And then they'll start speaking. I'll go, I'm not 24 with a PhD. I'm 12. What is it? Just help me understand. And it's really hard, the amount of people that can't do it. And I to be honest, it's leading my own business. Could I do it? It's not an easy thing. But Rod, I'd love to ask you, slight sort of sidestep, but I love how refreshing and how insightful you are at seeing things that many might miss. So what is a belief that you have about leadership that most people will find difficult to grasp?
So there's a number of things.
Yeah.
And often I have these reactions to what I see on social media and LinkedIn because they get lots and lots of likes, but largely they're so unhelpful. So there's a common thing that you'll get, which is that like leadership is just purely about being empathetic. And again, like I don't disagree with that. You do want people who have high empathy, and who are able to put themselves in the shoes of a customer, team member, and sort of so on and so forth. Get that entirely. But there are certain times when actually you need people to be, and I think I'm not totally convinced I've got the right word, but I think there's an element of callousness to it. So, for example, if you are leading a team of 1,000 people, right, the business is really struggling, okay, it may be the right thing to do to make 300 people redundant to save 700.
Yeah.
That's not empathetic. That's callous. Like to literally go through those people and go, you no longer work here. And they say, I don't know how I'm going to pay the mortgage. And you're like, I don't have an answer to that question, right? I really don't. Okay. Where this sort of came from. So if you are overly empathetic, you will really struggle to make those decisions because there are times when you need to sacrifice the needs of few for the needs of the wider organization. And if you can't do that, then I think you can't lead effectively.
Yeah.
I remember this sort of quite vividly when, again, I was taught as a rescue diver, just a PADI rescue diver on my gap year. And I remember the diving instructor saying, look, I've dealt with people who are drowning. If you actually have to do this, swim out to someone and stand off them, swim off them, like stay away from them. And the reason you have to do that is because you have to get them to calm down first. If you don't do that, they will grab you and pull you under because they are fighting for their lives. It's a natural reaction, but if that happens, you're in a lot of trouble here. And what you may end up you may end up getting into a fight with that individual. So stand off them, tell them, I am not approaching you till you calm down. That person may get into real difficulty at that point there.
Yeah.
You could argue that that's quite callous, but at the same time, from my perspective, I'm like, no, what's worse than 1 people drowning, 2 people drowning?
Yeah.
What's worse than 300 redundancies? 1,000. And again, like the military leaders sort of have to make these decisions. There were times when I had to make the call on which section would go first or who was going to break contact and cover, and knowing full well that this might lead to some people being killed, but this was the job. This is what I had to do.
Yeah.
And if you're overly empathetic or overly friendly or overly involved in people's lives, it becomes very difficult to make tough decisions for the organization that may have negative impacts on the individuals.
It's so true. And I think these words like, be authentic, bring your authentic self, going back to your multi-tool at the beginning, actually, we don't want to show up with everything in every context like that. That's not appropriate. It's not helping the organization. It's not helping the task or project. If I bring my kind of wild funness and my kind of direct approach to things, it's quite confusing. So we do have to kind of like pick a lane of how we approach things with ourselves, and actually certain decisions are hard, and you call it callous. I actually would say, to me, the word I would use is a really clear boundary, and boundaries can seem really hard. Boundaries can seem really immovable and mean. And we know why we're doing it, but the how we do it. So why we have to fire or make 300 people redundant is so that 700 don't. It's so the business lives. We know the why, but the how we do it, I think there's always space for empathy in the how. I know you're not saying it's not that, but it's how, in the how that we do the why. That's where there's scope for how do we do boundaries with empathy? How do we do it with kindness, but still have that direct approach?
Yeah, I think that's true. I don't have any disagreement with that. I think that the point that is undermade and people don't talk about it enough is that, fundamentally leadership is about performance. It's about creating an environment where people can perform.
True.
And that does not mean like being like soft and cuddly and like all the time. It just like there's no evidence for that whatsoever. I mean, yes, you want to be supportive, you want to be warm, you want to be friendly with people. But it's not enough. Sometimes you have to say to people, like, I think you're capable of better.
Yeah.
No, I think I can see that you can do more. That's a kind of combination of both, but it's quite a challenging message for some people.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And what's interesting as leaders, when you step into that callous space, let's call it, of being direct, what often happens is we're up against someone behaving, it triggers them. And so then you get such a behavior backlash from them with having a boundary, because a lot of people haven't had boundaries in their life. So a lot of it's not about you being a bad leader because of the feedback that they're cross with you. It's actually just that they are ill-equipped at understanding what a boundary is and how to perform with a boundary. So sometimes you can be a great leader but have people hate you, and think that you're a bad person and put you in a category of being callous and mean, when actually you're not. You hold your ground. I work with leaders and give them the feedback and go, you've done the right thing. You have done the right thing. Yeah, but they will hate me. You haven't been unkind. You've put the business first. It's part of the job. It's part of the job. Yeah.
And ultimately it's about respect. And if you're clear about, look, let's all make sure we're all on the same page here. My job is to make decisions in the interest of this organization.
Yeah.
And sometimes that may, if you are not performing, if you're not delivering the results, that may not be great for you. But just be very clear that I will put the needs of the organization, the needs of the team before myself and you as individuals. I think that's a big part of it. I don't see people talking about that enough. That's the difficult part of leadership.
Yeah, I know, but it's not very it's not very clickbaity, is it? And it's not
Yeah.
very like bring the hard word. But I mean, there's a real space for it. It's true. It's really true. And you look at, I do quite a bit with parenting stuff, and I feel so sad that teenagers are allowed to be so entitled. And we go, oh, such an entitled generation, the younger generation. But it's because parents, and I'll do it at times, we're just so overly protective of the experiences our children have. And so they're growing up with this. And then, hey, they go to work and they expect everything to be so nice for them. And, you look back at our parents' generation, they were brought up with a bit more of an iron fist, but they could take challenge, they could take discipline, they could take accountability. That's something we're really missing. And we've got to practice this stuff at home, I think, with our own families in order to help them become a workforce
Yeah.
that will be able to take the challenge.
Yeah, I think I was reading over lunch the newspaper. Andy Farrell's got his sort of book out, and he had his son Owen Farrell, who, for those of you that are interested in rugby, both of them incredible rugby players. But
Right.
Owen was born to teenage parents who were, as far as I could tell, about 15, 16 years old.
Wow.
And Andy Farrell's writing in his book that at one stage, because he was training to be a sort of professional athlete, his son was just not sleeping, and so his wife literally went into her parents' bedroom with the baby, like in tears, like absolutely broken. And the response from the parents, like, forgive me if I get any of this wrong, but this is kind of what I read, was she needs to learn how to do this.
Yeah.
This is your thing, right?
Yeah.
You have created this. I will help you through it, but I'm not parenting this child because you decided to have children so young.
Yeah.
Or were reckless, or whatever it kind of,
Yeah.
probably a bigger conversation there. But there was a part of me that was like, yeah, that's that.
Love
That's
it.
that establishment of boundaries.
Yeah.
You're in this situation from something you have done.
Yeah.
And I'd rather you hadn't done it. I'm sure there was probably a conversation around that. But I remember thinking, like, gosh, that's bold.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
also that's that, like, I'm pushing back on you
Love it.
in order for you to kind of learn how to do this.
And
I'm not going to do it for you.
there's so much growth in that though. So my little mini world, single parent with 4 kids. Sometimes, the Mona Jonah kicks in and I'm like, oh, it's such a lot. I've got so many children, so much going on. And I have a friend in my life who is amazing. And he said, Dolly, you chose 4 kids. You chose this. You chose to divorce. You chose this. Man up, like woman up, like put your pants on, go for it. And I actually really like it because a lot of things I get is, I know, Dolly, it's such a lot. It must be so hard. I don't know how you do it. None of that helps. The point is no, I chose this. Yeah, would I choose it again in this way in order? Probably not. I'd probably make alterations, but hey, I did choose it. And there is something about, again, tapping into that. You have agency. What are you going to do with it? Create something different on the back of it to be able to manage it rather than being a victim of it. And that's a key leadership principle, I think, actually, in all of this.
But also, like having 4 kids, what would be worse? Like going from 4 to 3 kids, right? Like,
Good point.
I can't think of anything worse than that. And like,
Do you know what? Absolutely.
all the time.
Absolutely. And actually, yeah, there's a lovely expression. If you put all your worries in a bag of worries with everyone else's in the world, you pick your own back out, isn't it?
Probably would, yeah. Yeah.
Rod, as we land, putting you on the spot now, what would be a kind of, at this point in time, you could change your mind in a month, a week, whatever. What would be your call to action for any leader right now who's feeling really overwhelmed, and who's got big targets?
Oh gosh. So when I'm feeling overwhelmed,
yeah, nice.
The tool that I apply is I write things down. I write things down and I look at all of the things on my plate, and that's kind of helpful, right?
Like a long list or like brainstorm?
No, a whole list. Like, what are the things that practically need to get done? And so I get it all out of my head. That's kind of the first thing.
Amazing.
And then generally speaking, I'm like, right, okay, so what's important? What's not important? What can I decommit from if I have to? How can I move sort of some of these things round so that I can really focus on things that I can control and are going to have like big impact? I don't have a better way of doing it than that. What I also think is kind of helpful is like, at the end of the week, this is something that I'll do, is if you're feeling that kind of sense of overwhelm, it's normally probably because you've taken on too many things. And I am as guilty of this as anyone else. So I start to kind of look back at the week and go, right, what of those meetings was a waste of time, kind of with hindsight, and going forward, where can I sort of see things that are just going to soak up time and not add any value?
Yeah.
Where's the gaps that the important stuff are gonna fit in? Because it's so easy to say to someone, yeah, I'll give you an hour of my time, or half an hour here, there, or half an hour there, and it's like suddenly you realize that you're reactive and you're playing defense all the time, and you get to the end of the week and you go, I've achieved nothing that I needed
Yeah.
to get done.
Yeah.
And that's that iterative learning process. So, after this afternoon, I'll take the dog for a walk and I will think about what have I not done? If I could run the week again, what would I bin and what would I put in?
Oh, I love that.
And that really does help me, actually. And where am I creating like big space? Some of this process has generated some really useful insights for me. So, for example, there's a reason we're doing this in the afternoon, straight after lunch. Because what I have found is that in the mornings, I'm really on it. I can get a lot done quickly. So if I have to write a series of proposals, I can sit down, like go through them, get them good to go.
Yeah.
In the early afternoon, so I normally try and do calls from sort of 1 to 3 after lunch. I tend to have a bit of an energy slump. So I kind of need that interaction like we're having here. That's really helpful.
Yeah.
And then before anything goes out at the end of the day, I'll just sit down, proofread it. Is that ready to go? Is it client ready? Is it of a high standard?
Yeah.
And then kind of like that's it, and I sort of send everything out. And I live in a world where I'm responsible, so I have high autonomy, high responsibility.
Yeah.
If that means I have to go to bed early tonight, get up at 5 tomorrow morning, and do a couple of hours, I'm perfectly willing to do that.
Yeah.
That's not me, but I don't want to have an impact on my children, so I won't like sleep in, for example, and work from 10 to 12 because now my wife has to look after them and manage that. So there are noticing that there are times when you have to get things done. There are times when you don't, but also like it's these reflection loops that I keep coming back to. They are so valuable.
I think that's really key, and I love that. I don't know if you use that as a coin of phrase, but what do I bin and what do I put in, like that, right? Nice little bit of a little soundbite clickbait there for us. But it's really good, that reflection point, because there's a great quote that says we don't learn from experience, we learn from reflecting on experience. And it's that piece, isn't it? You can't just experience stuff and go, oh yeah, I'm really experienced. Did you reflect on it? Have you debriefed it? Have you recognized what worked, what didn't, what could be different?
How are you going to apply that going forward?
Yeah, absolutely. Rod, thank you so much. I've learned a lot. My brain has expanded a lot, and I'm really grateful for that tool from Dave Snowden. Was it?
Yeah, the Cynefin framework.
Yeah, because I do think that does really link with that context piece of recognizing our context. I think that's a real takeaway for people listening.
Yeah, it's Cynefin, and it's Welsh for habitat. There's plenty of links out there. Watch the videos with Dave Snowden. He's worth a follow on LinkedIn as well.
Great. That's a great resource. Thanks so much. Well, thank you very much. And no doubt we'll get you back on again at some point.
Thanks, Dolly. It was great to see you again.
Thanks, Rod. I hope you found that conversation as rich as I found it when I was in the conversation. The takeaways I really want us to bed down into are the following. Number one, writing things down and drawing things. How powerful to let your brain and your intellect and your gut get into a position to see things differently through drawing it. And that doesn't need to be sort of hours spent doing it, but actually in a strategy meeting, in a one-to-one, let's draw the problems, let's draw the process blocks, let's see how we can understand things differently through a pictorial depiction. And the second thing is this thing about context is really embedding within me, because context changes repeatedly in fast-paced business, fast-paced growth. And we need to take audit of our context, of what's required of us, a bit like that multi-tool Rod showed at the beginning. Which parts of ourselves do we need to apply to leadership at which times? And within that, this push for experimentation. Are you experimenting in any way for growth? And what does that experimentation look like? I love the 3-year plan with 12 sprints within it. I think that's a really helpful actionable next steps. How could you break down the next 3 years into 12 sprints of experimenting with different things, exploring different things that might stick, might not stick, whether it's process, product, or type of employee initiative? But what are your sprints? And if you find it difficult to get outside of your own space to consider this, then I urge you to get a coach. You could reach out to Rod and his business, Leadership Capital. You could reach out to me. We have networks within us if there's someone else you'd want. But getting a coach, getting someone, an external person to help you think and consider and realign and apply yourself differently to get the growth you want is going to be key to getting you to your big targets and your big goals. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you again next time.